We then became £50,000 in debt and it killed us. Joe said to me, and I remember this, we're driving around, and she said, you seemed quite like the gym. Why don't you just learn to train people? People talk about making 10k a month, 20k a month, 100. People forget, like, those things are great, but I was paying my biggest bill by taking 2 payments. I was just stuck at doing sort of like 15 grand a month. Year after year, it was like 15 grand, 15 grand, 15 grand. And I was still like, it's not going anywhere. And so I started doing paid in full, and it went from 15 to like...
What helped you accelerate that process at the beginning?
Making lots of mistakes. I actually say this to everybody who joins. I'm looking to find people to come into the business who are better than me at absolutely every part of this business.
If you had to start from scratch today, no assets, nothing, no social media, what would you do to build back up to, let's say, 100k plus per month?
I would go straight to LinkedIn.
Welcome to Hypergrowth, Andy. Andy Naylor. The man, the myth, the LinkedIn legend. Thank you for joining us, Andy. He is an absolute machine in the business space, the entrepreneurship space. He's a serious authority and a very, very switched on entrepreneur. Now, Andy, you have a lot of information, knowledge, experience that I'm sure you're going to share with our audience, but I actually want to know a bit more about you. So first of all, hello, Andy. Hello. And tell us a bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you for the intro. I'm not sure how I'm now going to keep up with that. Thank you very much. Absolute delight to be here. How far back do you want me to go?
Let's go back to when you were a baby and you were just coming up. So how did you get started in online coaching, let's say?
Okay, so I'll go back to, I guess, a story without trying to be too in-depth. So this is not my first business. I think, as most entrepreneurs will say, probably the business that they're most successful in is not the first one that they start. So the first business I had was in a completely different world, in the world of hairdressing. Yeah, no one really knows this. My wife, Jo, is a lifelong hairdresser, and she's exceptionally good at it. I don't just say that. She is exceptionally good at it. While she was going through that path, I was sort of going through a sales and marketing inside, working for a daily newspaper. I was actually very successful, worked my way from being a rep to a field sales rep to running a team to running a whole advertising sales floor. 24 people were on the sales floor, 23 females, 1 guy, just to put that out there. So it was quite challenging. But during that time, I was kind of getting used to what it looked like to manage people, hit sales, run departments. And we sort of got to a point where an opportunity presented itself where we could buy into a salon at the bottom of the road that we lived at. We were like, that's a bit of a no-brainer. So I borrowed the money and we bought a salon and we rebranded it. We bought it it was 2008. Which was the middle of the massive recession, which is normally the right time to start something because you can buy stuff cheap. So we started this business and we made it very successful. But the goal was never to have one salon. The goal was to grow a few and then sit back and watch the empire grow, as we all want. So I think 4 years into it, we decided to expand. We looked at lots of areas and we decided to get another one in rugby. We got that, and that essentially was the downfall of that business. Because we took on a building that was way too big for us. It was a basement, a ground floor, a first floor. It was huge. It was a lovely big building. I planned a certain amount of money to renovate it, a certain amount of time. It took double the money and double the time. So by the time we moved in, we were already massively on the back foot. And we sort of plowed on for about 4 years. In the meantime, VAT had gone from 15% to 17.5% to 20%. And it killed us. So at some point, I had to say, look, we can't carry on. We had to liquidize the company, which was still to this day probably the most stressful thing we've done. We then became £50,000 in debt, personally, and redundant. So we became immediately massively in debt and had no work. Joe went straight back to hairdressing, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? And Joe said to me, and I remember this, we're driving around. We actually were driving somewhere, and she said, you seemed quite like the gym. Why don't you just learn to train people? That was the beginning of me saying, yeah, I can spend a bit of time in the gym. And I think 6 months, I don't know how long it took, but maybe 6 months later, I think qualified as a PT. About a year later, I was then the most successful PT in my town. I say that it wasn't a big town, so it's not like I'm the most successful PT in London. No, it wasn't that. But I was already fully booked. And then for the next 5 years, that's what I did. So I sort of learnt my trade in terms of being an in-person PT. Got to 2019, and I was sick of it. To be totally honest, same people, same time, with no disrespect to anybody, but same people, same time, same conversations. And in September 2019, I said to Joe, I'm done. I either need to find something else to do or I take the whole thing online. She was like, what? And so I took the whole thing online, and that's really then what's led me to this point.
Interesting. Now, the shift into online, let's say, from PT, where did you struggle in terms of building, first of all, either a presence, either the systems to generate leads, client acquisition is a big thing, and of course, sales, the master skill that you need for everything across every business, as many people shout about. So what are your thoughts on all of this? So client acquisition, sales, skills that are needed to scale a business efficiently.
When I first went online, well, it was 5 months before the pandemic. There were online PTs, there were people already doing it. It was certainly not as common as it is now. The competition wasn't the same. There were people doing it. I had one client acquisition source, and that was Facebook. I had no presence anywhere else. I don't think I had a LinkedIn. I had miles until I found LinkedIn. Instagram, I just couldn't get my head around. And Facebook, we had a particular system that we got to work on Facebook that still technically would work today. So I might say something about that, I might not, we'll see. But I would say it was relatively straightforward. It just took a lot to do. So it was a lot of finding the right people and where they were hanging out on Facebook, getting into conversations, putting them into our world, having DM conversations, and then all of my sales were, I think they were just literally WhatsApp chats. I used to sit with my computer in front of me with WhatsApp open, so I couldn't see anyone, just like, and I'd just be sitting there talking. I can't even think if I had anything on the screen. I wouldn't have had a script, I don't think. I honestly can't remember. I must have had something there, maybe a prompt or something. I don't know. Maybe their profile, actually. It might have been their profile, so I could just like delve around. Oh, you said this back and then, and they're thinking, God, this guy really knows me. And that's one of the secrets of sales. If you know someone well enough, or you are joining the conversation that's already in their mind, and it's not a tactic, it's just doing a good job. And so that worked really well. The only issue I probably faced at the beginning was everything I was selling was monthly. I had a limiting belief about taking paid in full payments. I just didn't know how to do that. I didn't dare ask for it. I had 3 tiers, and it was 150 a month, 200 a month, 250 a month. And if I got a 250 a month, I can remember literally running around the house. I'm like, I've got, it was my top sale. It was massive. I was absolutely ecstatic because technically at that point, if I got 250s, I'd paid my mortgage. Because my mortgage at that time was like just over 500 quid. So if I took 2 of those payments, that's the reality. People forget. People talk about making 10K a month, 20K a month, 100. People forget. Like, those things are great, but I was paying my biggest bill by taking 2 payments.
I was exactly the same. I was like, this is how much I need to survive and live. And then everything else, I'm just doing a good job. This is just what I like doing. And then, as you said as well, back in 2019, for me as well, I had 0 social presence for the first 2-3 years. All I did was cold outbound. For me back then, it was spam posting in as many Facebook groups as possible, getting kicked out of 9 out of 10 of them. One of them would hit, and I just absolutely ran for every single member in that group. And then you made a very, very key point, which I think is the downfall of the entire fitness marketing outbound lead generation space at this point. It's real conversations. People don't like being sold. People like making the decision to buy. And I feel now the outbound space has gone into conversations which aren't real, as in which aren't even trying to sound real. And yes, of course, like at a certain time, you need team members to take over those conversations, but they are moving into fitness conversations like, are you trying to lose fat or build muscle in the first 0.5 of a line? And then it's also appreciate the follow, the most automated outbound messages to begin a conversation with as well. And I truly do feel that's where first message response for nearly every conversation went downhill. And that's exactly where I feel I spent all my time. Like, what is going to be the first message that converts? But you already know there is of course, a step-by-step learning process into all of this. So What helped you accelerate that process at the beginning?
Making lots of mistakes, if I'm honest. Making lots of mistakes, like knowing, you think back, I can't remember how many doing exactly what you've just said, you'd burn a conversation so quickly because you might see someone who looks like a perfect ICA, avatar, demographic, whatever you want to call it, and you would start a conversation, and so very, very quickly, you want to transition. You want to sort of work out, are they interested or not? But at the end of the day, and I say this to our setters now, I'm like, you're talking to a real human. That's a real human on the other side of that screen with real fears, problems, other stuff going on right now that you've just interrupted their life on. Like, just try and take your time just a little bit, because social media has turned into, the version of social media that we probably see, given who we're searching for and how we use it, it's just sales platforms. I kind of miss, gone are the days where, not that it's a good way to spend your time, but I kind of miss once upon a time when you'd go on a social media and there was like no selling. It was just pure fun, people doing dumb stuff. I remember Jo had Facebook about 4 years before I did. She got it and I'm like, what are you doing? You're sharing your day with people. She's like, I'm like, what do you mean you're sharing your day with? She's like, oh, you just upload a picture of what you've done. I'm like, to who? She's like, other people on Facebook. I'm like, but who? But when you get it and you first look, you think, okay, this is actually kind of interesting and fun. And that's not what social media now looks like in any way whatsoever. And I think humans have become extremely clued up to exactly what's going on. So the way that, I don't tactics, but the methods to sort of navigate through that on one platform work different to another. LinkedIn, you can be way more direct. Instagram, Facebook, you've got to be way more subtle, because people are just going around their average day looking at kitten photos, essentially, and you've got to try and break through that. So I think the lessons were probably, we had a particular system that worked that gave me an in to start a very quick conversation about fitness. We took someone through a system, a something, made them take a certain action, so that the people we were then talking to had kind of gone, like this, I'm kind of interested. And that's what gave us our in. And I think what people are doing now, they're not waiting for the, I'm interested. They're just, it's a living, breathing human. I'm going to pitch fitness to them. And I think that's what's happening too much. And what it's doing is it's making it more difficult for the gazillions of potential hopeful online PTs, because they're coming up against the same problems.
I agree. And I think there are people even established in the space which are burning through thousands and thousands of leads purely because either the worst thing I've seen come to the space, AI chatbots, which are absolutely ramming through a ridiculous amount of leads, when the entire point of the conversation is to make sure they know, like, trust you enough for them to get on a call and actually show up and buy. And then the other thing is the improperly trained or underqualified, underskilled appointment setters, DM setters, even dialers. Now, I know that there are, of course, challenges for you that may have come up going into all of this, inevitable, but what do you wish you learned earlier to not make that mistake back then, that something that you wish you knew earlier that would have helped?
In terms of the setting side of things?
Everything.
Business. Okay. First of all, I suppose one of the first lessons is you can't do everything yourself, and everyone starts off at that point. And I can remember I remember quitting working in a gym and then thinking, I'm an online PT. I can now be wherever I want to be. And guess where I was? Sat in the corner of my kitchen for the next 4 months. I just changed being in a gym to sitting in one place. And I thought, okay, this isn't quite what I expected. So then I changed that from, kitchen or Starbucks. And they were the two places I worked. And I'd go into Starbucks and I remember doing something called a power hour. I can't think where that came from, but it was sort of X amount of time searching for the people, X amount of time putting them through the next stage, X amount of time answering DMs, and I'd go round that circle, and that would be the beginning part of the day. The second part of the day would be selling, and then at some point I'd be doing check-ins. So I'd be trying to do it all. And so I think outsourcing some of that as fast as possible. The first, a coach and a VA are the first two hires I think everyone's going to need to get. VA probably being the first one, because they can start doing some of the more, so to speak, slightly easier work. Coaching is coaching. Like, you need to have enough skill and ability to coach. So I think learning to bring in the right people quickly, but then what also comes with that is the phrase, which is fire fast, yeah. And I've been really bad at that, to be honest. I inherently always think that someone's going to get better. They're going to, and I've made mistakes through the business in terms of hiring people, hiring somebody not out of desperation is a strong word, so I wouldn't say hiring out of desperation, but hiring out of, I damn well know I need somebody. And I can see the gap where I need somebody, and someone comes along who I think fills that gap, but what they actually do is they don't fill the gap, and they actually drain time from not just me, but also other team members where, if another team member sees someone come in and they're like, really, Andy? And they can lose enthusiasm, that can have a very quick knock-on negative effect. So I think the sort of understanding a good hiring, and this is still a lesson I'm learning now, understanding a good hiring sort of methodology, sticking to it, but and also I think this is something that a lot of online, I know I definitely didn't do this enough, not spend enough time with them. Hire them and assume they know what to do. And I think I've certainly done that. I see other people do that. And then they'll say to a setter, why have you not booked 25 calls this week? And the setter's like, I don't know, I'm doing everything I can. It's like, can you... And it's more that attitude rather than let's spend an hour every single day role-playing conversations or looking at your conversations. And yeah, it's a huge time demand, but I don't really think we don't hire someone who's perfect at the beginning. They need to know your offer, your business, the person you're speaking to, the tone of voice they're supposed to use if they're emulating you in your profile.
I agree. I mean, I think this is the biggest bottleneck for everyone at this kind of level where they want to buy back freedom, where they want to remove themselves from certain areas of the business, more out of necessity as well, lesser known for most people. It is a necessity to scale past a certain point. But then a lot of people, I feel, get into this trap of assuming a filled role is a job being done. So they assume that the setter has, I don't know how much you want to go into what kind of stuff we do together in terms of work, but in terms of management training on these people, it's almost always a matter of they default to the level of skill from their previous role. Everything that we assume they know is based off of our expectations of what we know. And then we don't really understand, I make this mistake a lot as well, we don't really understand that when deadlines of what they should be doing is based off of the standards of their previous role. And then we forget that we should probably spend more time,
still those.
Exactly.
But this is where, we have something, I'm sure, well, I don't know if I'm sure, but you would know this better than I hope that, when someone comes into a role, they have, clear KPIs, and they don't need to be very difficult, but we also have a thing called a sequence. I don't know where this came from. I certainly didn't make this up. I'd love to say that I made this up, but it came from somewhere, which is a sequence of importance. And I've had it for years. I don't know where it came from, but it was so here's your KPIs, but this is the order that they should be hit in. So this is what you do when you first come in, and you work through this order. So if you get to this point, like let's say there's 10 things on that sequence, and you get to number 8, but you've smashed all 8, fair enough. That's probably a day, well done. If you get to 10, but you did everyone at 60%, that's not so good. I'd rather you do less of them and do them well. And I think you're right. If the overall quality of training, not just in the fitness industry, because you think, we've got setters coming in from working in solar, working in all random places. We've had setters come in and I interview and I say, tell me about the KPIs that you had in your last job. Tell me about what? And I'm like, KPIs, what does that mean? I'm like, okay, cool, right. Well, that's going to be a starting point. These are things that you should hit on a daily basis. Oh, no, I was just told just to message as many people as I could. I'm like, Okay, now I either think, do I take this person on and try and start from scratch? Maybe, if they've got great attitude and things like that. But it is a big uphill battle. If you then say to someone, you need to message this many people, follow up this many people, they're like, what? And I'm like, that's the role of a setter. I think most come in with that instilled from other businesses.
I agree completely. And as you know, you've been in recruiting, hiring space, and you have a very solid team behind you. It takes a lot more people than you think to get the right person. As in, for us, it was 13, 14 closes before one stuck and consistently hit KPIs. And then we've hired over, 120 DM setters now, which is ridiculous to build a team of 5.
Over what period of time, out of interest?
That's over 4.5 years now. So we were just spamming job posts in as many different Facebook groups, school groups as possible. And then we see people coming in. Maybe there was 80 outbound messages sent as well. Maybe that led to about 10 qualified applications with Loom videos that we asked for. Yeah. Maybe that led to about 2 qualified hires and 1 churns after a month anyways. Yeah. And it was just the same process again and again. And then I have a feeling a lot of people assume it's just meant to be the first person with appointment setter in their experience with.
But then you can also understand when people are sitting there going through that thinking, can I just not put an AI bot in this and just, Right, of course it is, because I've looked into them. I'm sure, and I know other people that use them. I've seen kind of the level of quality, and they're clearly getting better. And you sit there and think, I could just train one of these things on every conversation I've had and just off. It obviously isn't that straightforward, but you just replace, what is it? Here's an Hormozy phrase, and I can't remember it. Something like perceived optimism, so I think the valley of despair. Like, you think, this sounds like a really good idea. Then it's like, oh, actually, there's way more to this. Oh, I was better off having people. Like, I just imagine people will go through the same sort of cycle of that. And it's, if you interview 5 people and pick one, or you interview 50 and pick one, your chances of, if you go through the interview process of 50, as hard a work as it is, that you're going to find the right one, it's just you need a recruitment manager at that point, don't you? I guess you must have someone in place by this point who's like, that. Your job is recruitment. This is all you need to do. Go do it.
Yeah, but one of the biggest things that kind of stopped me doing that for me was ego. I was like, I'm the best recruited person on the team. There's no one going to be...
Who, not how.
Exactly. And then I was like, what am I doing sitting on 20 interviews a week? And I have someone else that maybe...
You just record them and SOP it out, right?
Just SOP'd it out in the end, but it took me too long. It was one of those things. And I refused. I was like, I am the best person in the role to do this job, in the company to do this job. I wasn't. It turns out someone else is better than me.
I actually say this to everybody who joins. I'm like, there's a few things I say to everybody that they're surprised. And one is, I'm looking to find people to come into the business who are better than me at absolutely every part of this business, aside from running the business or being the name above the business. I'm like, I want you all to be better than me at coaching, but everything. And they're like, really? I'm like, I have no ego whatsoever. Like, please come and be better than me at everything. Like, that solves all my problems if you are. That's every single part.
That's because you're at the scale and you have the experience and knowledge you do right now. I think people do also get into I don't like sales, so I need to hire a closer in their first 2 months of the business. So like, I don't like content, so I'm going to just start running ads. And that's like off of the first month or so of them starting or trying. But 100%, if someone is smarter than you can do it, it is the best thing. But another question for you, how do you handle stress? High stake decisions for you to consistently grow, learn, improve?
Great question. And I think it depends on what it is. I've been through I've been around long enough first of all, the closing of the business that we had back in 2013, when we closed, I had to liquidize that company. That's still the most stressful thing I've been through, because we knew exactly what we were facing at that time. And I remember the night before, you have to have a thing called a creditors meeting. And I hope anyone listening to this never has to have a creditors meeting in their life. But you basically have a point where it's the owners of the business, the liquidator, and anybody else can turn up and say their piece. And of course, we had 24 pissed off hairdressers who could easily have all turned up. And at that point, they were all screaming blue murder about us across any piece of social media. So we thought they were all going to turn up and pretty much rip us to shreds. None of them turned up. But the night before, Joe and I neither slept, and I couldn't feel my hands, and they were full of pins and needles. So I know what actual stress feels like. And then even that's still not what other people, put someone in a war scenario, they know stress on a different level. So I guess you've just got to think, all bad things will pass, just as all good things will pass. It's not the end. Yeah, it might be shit. Yeah, things might not go the way you... And I think the more of those things you go through, the more you realise it's just another thing to overcome. And I think some people, me included, stress over the stuff that's not the biggest thing to stress over. I think that's human nature, I believe. And certainly when you're running a business and as the team grows, I could sit and focus my mind on any one of a few different areas of my business. I'm like, that's not exactly how I want it to be. It's not exactly... And then I could start stressing over it. Whereas it's like, it's a small fire. It can smolder away over here. It's not going to cause the biggest problem. That, I think, helps. I can't put out all fires all the time. And some fires, quite frankly, are warming. Like, they're fine. They're okay over there. I think probably having the right people around you, so mentors. Joe, my wife, is someone who I don't put stress on her, but I will certainly talk things through. She's a way more calmer personality than I am. So we sort of like balance each other out quite a lot. And I think, as obvious as this sounds, like talking things through with people, and I think also, particularly in what we do, it can become quite... It's like working in a silo. It's like in the same way that businesses, you've got coaching silo here and you've got and they need to communicate. I think a lot of online coaches, although it doesn't look like this on social media, everyone do it, but in the reality, people are working like inside an enclosed bubble half the time, and they don't realize that everyone else who's making their life look amazing are struggling with exactly the same bloody things. And I think that's a downfall of a lot of people. People, see people driving around in cars that they've probably just hired, or, living in Dubai and doing, like, people think, oh my God, everyone else has got all this stuff sorted. No, they haven't. Everyone's just like, I'm not going to say winging it, but everyone is like almost having it, no one's really all there. Everyone's got their own level of a struggle no matter where you get to. And I think if you just think like that, it's like, oh, okay. It makes you then realise you're not failing, you're just on your journey somewhere.
I wish everyone understood this. You never want to trade your life for someone else's purely because of what you see on the outside. No one knows the 5 layers deep. Yeah. And what you mentioned about stress, like, you can only focus on what you can change and learn from what you can't, essentially. But I very, very much agree, Vince, in mentorship as well. I think it just opens that frame of thinking for you to be able to essentially access not just information, but dial in what's productive for growth. Yeah. I mean, more of a selfish question, very selfish question. What do you feel was the most beneficial for you in terms of working together?
There's been a couple of things. Obviously when we started working, we didn't have any structure in terms of organic. We're now booking more, I won't mention the number of calls, but we're now booking, hundreds of calls a month, and a good degree of those being organic. And we're very successful with advertising, but advertising is volatile. We've been through periods of time where, ad cost goes flying up, and it's not, a good idea to continue running them until it gets sorted out. And we had nothing else. So we built a complete organic structure. But it's never normally just the systems. It's quite often just talking stuff through. It's nearly as simple as that. I think the real benefit is when you're looking, people approach me and they're like, oh, I've got this problem with my business. And I'm like, I'm not telling you this is what you need to do, but looking from the outside in, that seems really bloody obvious to me. Because I'm not emotionally connected. Looking at the situation, looking at what you've told me, does this not seem the obvious? And like, oh, now you put it like that. I'm like, yeah, because when you have someone who's able to look in, we were talking about something which we won't mention right now, but we were talking about something just before we came on air, and I had a certain thought in my mind. It's a serious decision. It's hard to come to a conclusion on that decision until someone else is like validates that decision externally. And I think sometimes that makes you kind of go, oh, yeah, well, that's exactly what I was... And it's like 10 tons comes off your shoulders because you realise what I was thinking the same thing that someone else who's externally looking. That's worth. You can't put price tag on that because it allows you. One, it makes you think or makes you realise, no, my decision making process is still running in the right direction. If someone externally, particularly certainly someone who's gone through building a coaching business and then is coaching X number of people, then the benefit that you have is seeing all that, which is a very specific seat to be in because you're like, you can see the same traits happening over and over and over again. Let's say I say, look, I'm thinking of this or that, and you would be like, I think that's a really stupid idea, and this is based on all this information. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to that because if I could see the same information that you could, I would come to the same logical process of like, yeah, actually, I can see 20, 30 other people having all tried that and it didn't work. I think, probably a good idea I don't try that. It's simply that. And, it could be something tactical, but quite often it's just, I'm thinking this, what do you think? I think that's a really bad idea, don't do it. Okay, why? Because I've seen this many people try it. I think that's always so useful.
I think shortcutting the decision process is valuable, but I think you being able to execute on that and actually listen and have an open mind is very, very important. I also
do people not then? Do you get just don't.
It's very, very nice working with people who are good executors and open-minded and are able to, let's say, follow through on what I can see from data, of course, but then are able to remove an emotional bias towards certain decisions and know that this is best for the business, whether it's now or whether it's next month. So this is a really, really big one. Of course, people want things tomorrow, day after, and that is fine. Like, there's moves you can make which are for the short term. There's moves you can make which are for the long term. For example, building an entire organic structure. Will most people do that? Will most people have the patience to do that? Most won't, especially if you have an acquisition channel which is working, but they don't see the long term in terms of CPAs going up, and they don't see that being a liquidating factor for ads themselves to scale those. Now, The other thing is, I do believe that it's quite important to look at opportunity cost for a lot of people who are unaware, because it's usually one decision that derails an entire business, or one decision that could skyrocket an entire business. And whether that's like setting teams, sales teams, even KPIs, whether it's back-end margins, numbers on everything, all the data stuff that goes into it, which people refuse to believe there's a better system outside of their own for. So I have to thank you in terms of making things easier for me to give you information that isn't difficult to take on for you. It's difficult's a bad way.
This is quite funny now. That shit, I think there was that particular tracking sheet you sent me. And for some reason, at the time I looked at it, I'm like, dude, I can't like, compute all this information. And I think what was cool, you were like, yeah, okay, just use this one. This is like half that and you'll be fine. And I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I was in a different headspace. I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, that's really, not simple is not the right word. That's really clear. Why did 3 weeks ago I could, because it was so new. And I'm probably still the same as many people. The first time I see something, I'm like, I can't work it out. I'm very visual. And I think I must have looked at it 3 weeks later and thought, well, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. But to be fair, you were patient enough not to say, Andy, like, what's the matter with you? Just use it. You were more like, just use this one for now. I think 2 weeks later, I was like, this doesn't have anywhere near the information I needed. And you pointed me back to the one you showed me 3 weeks earlier. And I was like, yeah, that one will be the one now. And sometimes I guess people go through, we've had the same tracker for 4 years and you just get used to how it looks, where stuff goes, how it feels. And I think any kind of movement to something else, there's normally a little bit of resistance, but normally I'm like, someone's giving me this based on the fact that it's clearly worked in other places for other people. So yeah.
It's one of those ones where I got stressed about this for a long time. I was like, what is it that I need in the business? What information do I need to make better decisions? And then why don't I have it? And why do I absolutely suck at being able to find the things I need and then making it overcomplicated and then trying to cut it down again and again? So I just spent 40 hours literally in a room, about 8 hours a day and 9 hours a day on a Google sheet for about a fair few days. But based on that, what other beliefs do you feel you had, let's say earlier in the business, mid, now even, that has been beneficial for you to overcome to scale past, let's say, the first milestone of, let's say, 50K a month? Had, of course, very, very good months. What was the first one that helped you scale past that initial barrier?
Paid in full payments.
Okay.
That was honestly, just take, so paid in full payments, I just didn't think I possessed the ability to get someone. And I think I was doing this 150, 200, 250. I was just stuck at doing sort of like 15 grand a month, 50, like you could look at the year after year, it's like 15 grand, 15 grand, 15 grand. And I was still like, well, I'm not unhappy with 15 grand a month. Like I had money. But I was like, it's not going anywhere. And so I started doing paid in full and it went from 15 to like 42 overnight, pretty much. I think the first person I pitched £1,500 to, and I think they just happened to say yes, and that was that belief broken. If they'd have said no, and then it would have maybe been a different story. But it was, I think, getting people to having the ability. I do not think I'm a great salesperson. For some reason, it kind of gets knocked around.
That's a lie.
Yeah, it's not a limiting belief, but I listen to some people who I'm like, they're a lot better than me. Like I kind of bludgeon people into saying yes half the time. I can't self-critique. I'm not.
Data would show that you have an 80-90% plus close rate.
Yeah.
So we'll.
There was a month.
We'll call that a good closing.
I think there was a month. I don't know if it was April or May last year. And I don't know how many sales tools. It was either 93 or 97% close rates. I think it was between a 4 and a 5K deal paid in full. And the only person that said, no one said no. The only person that was the drop off is that Stripe wouldn't let the payment go through. It didn't go through a couple of times, but I need to go and speak to my bank. And I was like, okay, it never came back. Otherwise, it would have been a 100%.
What was your best month? Where did you get to on your best month in terms of revenue? And then what led to that, let's say?
As in just sales for me?
Total revenue on the business. Where did you actually,
I think we
most
did
cash collected in a month?
Actual cash collected front end was about 130K. That was me. And I think one closer doing, I don't know how much did the closer put into it, but it was like about 130K. And I forget when that was last year. That was no organic. That was all coming from ads. That all came from ads. And that was when I was like, if I pitched someone 3K, that was the lowest I'd pitch. I hadn't taken a monthly payment for year. Well, I don't remember the last time. And I would average at like 4.5, 5K. And then every now and again, there'd be a 7K. I remember there being a 14K paid in full. And the guy's card, it was a I remember it being Barclay card for some reason. The guy's card failed on the first attempt. And I knew he had a hard stop in like 3 minutes. And he's like, oh, I'll have to come back to you. And I'm like, just try it again, see what happens. He tried it again and it went through. He's like, I've got to go. And he paid and just literally put the phone down. And I was like, I just sat there for 5 minutes. Like, I don't know what's just happened. 14K.
So if anyone could close it.
Yeah. So that was a 2-part call. So I think the biggest limiting belief was paid in full. Now I have a sort of split decision on this because I think paid in full is great and it opens up the door. It's great cash coming in, but I don't believe that that's security in a business, because if it was only me, and I don't know how many people listening to this where they might be the only closer, what happens if you, for whatever reason, can't get on a call, like lost your voice, ill, got run over by a bus, whatever? What happens to the revenue coming into the business? So paid in full is great. But I think I would always like to see a business with its recurring revenue that would cover the costs. People have got themselves away, like, oh, paid in full. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And we should get good at making that kind of close. But we shouldn't forget that if someone's, people seem to now think, taking a monthly. It's like, no, you can run a very successful Netflix, for example. So Netflix. I don't know how profitable they are or are not. I'm not sure, but you can have a very, very successful business on recurring revenue. And also, we've had a lot of people who came in who are on monthly, who their lifetime value far exceeds someone who paid in full. I still believe a mixture of both, because one is a degree of security and one is obviously cash flow, which is great. That's the biggest limiting belief, yeah.
Right. We have clients who are 100% recurring. We have clients who are, of course, heavy and paid in fulls. And, the recurring business is always going to be more stable, more sellable, a better business. But no one actually takes in the other factors as well, which, not no one, I'm saying a lot of people are forgetting the fact that for the entrepreneur, it is maybe an aggressive sprint, and it may take exactly this. Maybe for the business, yes, it may be a better option to build a strong recurring, and it is a long-term play. Like, let's be honest, for you to hit 130K in a month, and even to continue scaling off of that as well mentally. I mean, if someone is progressing slowly and that entrepreneur isn't as patient, there was going to be another shiny object, possibly. I think there is validity in both, and it just depends on that person's mental frame and even their skill sets. I mean, some people may have been absolutely derailed if they were just slowly compounding a 1, 2K, 3K, 5K a month extra on top of what they were doing, a 5% growth a month. And instead of the, moonshot 50% gains, 100, 200, 300% gains. So I really am like bang in the middle of the paid in full split decision business. Split pay business. But if you had to start from scratch today, no assets, nothing, no social media, just your experience to this day, what would you do to build back up to, let's say, 100K plus per month?
I would go straight to LinkedIn personally, because I would go to LinkedIn, I would get as many paid in fulls as I could, and I'd reinvest that back into ads. That's the quickest way that I would get back, because I know that demographic really well. I can sell to that demographic well. Not everybody can. I would do that far quicker. I think for us, and this is different for every business, but all of the other areas that we get leads from, prospects from, generally speaking, it would take me so much longer to build up quicker. Whereas I could go to someone on LinkedIn and just make 3, 4, 5K paid in full sales, and then I would just go reinvest that back into ads and just scale from there.
Now, for most people, would that be the same strategy you'd go for if you had no social profile as well? Would you build that right back up? Because considering we have a reasonable lead base there on organic LinkedIn.
So if I literally had zero everywhere,
no socials,
I would still try that way. Okay.
Back to Facebook groups.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny enough because we went from 15 to 40K months just by a Facebook group system. I still have that Facebook group today. There's 13,000 people in it. It's just fairly dormant, but we're actually reigniting it. And actually, I think we booked 4, 5 calls in the last 2 days just from that system again. So we just now got to find the right people. I've always wondered if I started completely from scratch. I've never really had a lot of luck with Instagram, although that's obviously one of the quick. Actually, there is. I'm not going to say where this is. I'll tell you afterwards. There is somewhere that we have started completely from scratch on, something completely new that I don't think most people know about. I'll tell you afterwards. But
Going on in the shadows without my knowledge.
there's something going on that I've heard no one talk about, but it fits our ICA like down to the ground. I would still head to LinkedIn, I think, although it's a slower growth, but I need less yeses. You know, it's one thing pitching, 200, 300, whatever. You still need a yes. I would far rather, pitch 5k, get one yes, and then use that 5k, reinvest it somehow into some sort of ad. The way that we run the LinkedIn ads, we can target exactly who we want to target, albeit they're expensive. That is still pretty much what I would do, and then the rest of it. And again, you could ask a different business, and it would be a very different way around it, because obviously I know some people who do extremely well off just things like Instagram, which we've not managed to do in the same way that other people have. But yeah, that would be my route, I think.
Not against it. So I don't think the acquisition channel that people are like stuck on wanting to grow and putting all their efforts into is always the best acquisition channel. There's people that like, let's say, hang in, this is the only thing I would do with Instagram. I don't think that they realize that, let's say, they can move to LinkedIn, or even like the LinkedIn guys as well. I don't think they think that they can go into another acquisition channel like LinkedIn ads, for example, right? Because they're like, okay, LinkedIn organic, that's it. That's the only thing I can do. And then they don't realize there's ads, right? So yeah. It's a big thing, because as soon as you're paying for leads, it's a different game for a lot of people. So of course, LinkedIn ads a fair bit more expensive cost per acquisition.
I remember when we first moved to anything LinkedIn, I remember thinking, this place is weird. It just feels like it's not particularly engaging. People don't really comment a lot. The content is obviously completely different. But you look through all of that and I go through my list of the 19,000 connections we now have, and I'm like, they're all savage. Like 80% of them are exactly who we want. And then we've now got 4 LinkedIn channels. We've actually reignited 2 more and sort of running things on those. One's my wife's. She doesn't know I'm doing that. Completely rebranded her LinkedIn but yeah, it is a completely different world. It's not as engaging. People are a lot nicer. I've noticed that, because we were talking about what people tend to say on some of the things I've had said to me on some of the Instagram ads are outright abusive, but it's always fun. I've not had anyone say anything quite so abusive on LinkedIn. They're just a little bit more restrained, I think.
I literally had to start from zero. I was actually going to say I'd probably be split across all of them because of action limits. Because you can get through like with your starting from zero on LinkedIn.
Well, then the question is it just you, or is it you plus team? That's then
just you.
So if it's just then you've only got so many hours in the day. Then the question is, where are the hours best spent? Because you're right. I mean,
you'd hit everything.
Yeah, right? I think I've got a shadow ban on my Facebook account. So we used to send out about 80 friend requests a day at one point. Like, we can't get past 10 right now.
Yeah.
So obviously we max that out in all of about 30 seconds, and then we have to, look at somewhere else. So I suppose it depends. If it were just me, yes, then I would probably spread a little bit, and then I would just work out which one's giving me the best return on the investment of my time, and then I would just spend a bit more time on that, more than likely.
Yeah, I'd probably just make a new IG, 9 photos or so. Even me need to even bot the account, so you don't have time to grow it organically, probably. And then outbound, I think you're capped at about 100 a day before you get action limits for non-followers, targeted non-followers. And then Facebook, LinkedIn, I'd probably even start scraping dial-in lists and then just pay for a CRM, dialer, and then just ram for as many leads as possible.
It's not like there's not
there's enough channels.
Right, exactly. There's not enough. I mean, I didn't think about dialing. I could go and find 35,000 leads and just dump them all in the CRM right now and just
sit there on the phone.
I don't think I'd want to sit and call them myself. I probably would.
You had to make 10 grand by tomorrow, and you had no option.
Well, then I would do it. Yeah, I would call them, triage them, and one part close them as much as I possibly could. I've had to make 10 grand tomorrow. I'm surprised by this point you've not made your own social media channel profile, as in platform. Like,
for me?
Yeah, I've thought about that.
For the B2B side of things?
Anything. Like, just make a whole new platform and.
I have one.
What, a whole, as in like a whole.
Oh, like an Instagram. You reckon I should build a full-on sales platform?
Yeah. You must have thought about it by now.
Building a social... I haven't, no. I think it might be the shiny object at the back of my head.
Right. The thing not to focus on. Yeah.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But honestly, I think you're very, very experienced and you've had a lot of information value to share. So closing thoughts with a mindset question for you. One book, resource, thought, belief that changed your mind that you feel was the biggest step in or most pivotal moment for you and the business more specifically? I'll give you
I tend to read books in sort of spurts. Like I have to, if I read a book, I have to sort of go out of my apartment to read it. I think that for some reason, I'll be honest, I can't remember a whole lot of the content of it. However, the one that does stick in my mind a lot is, it's a blue book. I don't remember the author, but it is Who Not How. I read it back to back with Buy Back Your Time, something like that. But the Who Not How, because you get to a point where, like I said a moment ago, I'm looking to find people who are better than me at everything in the business. And so whenever I'm like, I need to do this thing, I'm like, okay, I don't need to do this thing. I need to find someone who's better than me. That's the only way I can scale past where I am now. I could go off and take all the sales calls that come in and we could do 150 grand a month. That wouldn't be difficult, but that's also now not the goal. The goal would be to be able to get to that point, and I'm just puppeteering, I suppose, to a point. And then, so the answer to that is, well, how do I get to that point? It's Who Not How. So I think that book, I mean, I've read tons of books. I mean, Traction, which is one of the first really good books I remember reading, although I know we implemented a lot of that very, very quickly. But I think, yeah, if you want one, I would say the Who Not How. In terms of where I am right now, in terms of scaling, it's don't try and do something myself. It's find someone who's better than me at doing it and just give them the tools and get the hell out of the way. That's what I think.
I love it. And I think that's the goal that a lot of people have, but don't really know how to get there. It's more how do you get to a point where you remove yourself from the business, but also more have peace of mind on this being like a system that runs itself, which I think is very, very important. But I also think Motive by Patrick Lencioni should be sold together with Who Not How. It's such a good one.
Do you know, I've got that, but I don't think I've read it. I think I've got it to read.
I think I mentioned it. Yeah, it's good. You have all the Patrick Lencioni books.
Yeah,
it's really good.
I can even pick, it's a white book with black writing. It says, yeah, I don't think I've read it. I think I've got it.
Very good book.
Is that one of the Fable ones? Is that the guy?
Yes, I believe so. There's
a guy
something dysfunctional team.
Right. So yeah, that whole series of books are brilliant. One's about a guy taking over some sort of construction company or something, and all of those books are great. I just don't think, for some reason, I can't think of what Motive was about, so I'm guessing I've not read it. But they are great books because they're a story, and you get involved with the characters, and you're like, oh, you already know where this is going, and then it all sort of comes, they explain it at the end. I think they're great business books for anybody. Yeah, for sure.
And the lessons are valuable. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Andy. And if you have any closing thoughts, I mean, first of all, Andy's links everything in the bio if you want to have a chat or whatever it is. But any closing thoughts and anything that you want to close up with?
Closing thoughts. I mean, we've covered a lot, right? I think for anybody listening to this, and I'm guessing I can picture the sort of people listening to this. The thing to remember is wherever you are in your journey, it's not done. It's not over. You've not completed it. It's always something to do. Whenever you think you've got something done and completed, wait for something else to break, because something else will break, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. When a business is growing, it has growing pains. I think there's something called the rule of thirds, which is every level of third growth, I don't know, but all I know is every moment that we've grown, something breaks, one thing or another. So I think expect that. When something breaks, that's not failure. It's normally a sign that you're about to make a leap forward. And I try to remember that because I fail at more stuff than probably most other people have. The more stuff I fail at, the quicker I learn. Failure's not failure. It's just an opportunity to get better at something. And I think it's useful for people to remember that, particularly when they're working in that little sort of silo of looking out from their world at everybody else on social media, thinking everyone else is having a great life. No, everyone else is struggling just as much, going through their own stuff. I think just remembering that that's normal, that would be my parting message.
I love it. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Pleasure.